Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Here's what I want to say at the jump. We are all really anxious. We're all really scared. For those of us who are alive today, this is an unprecedented situation. I don't think anyone living has been through something like this. This is touching all aspects of life. This is, of course, bringing on huge concern about physical health for us and for all of our loved ones and anyone in the world. We're worried about the future. I know many of you are worried about finances and jobs as things continue to sort of expand and as we get ready for a kind of longer and longer pandemic. All of us are dealing with social isolation, and there's the cancellation of really important events, graduations, weddings. That's just a gut punch, right? To work so hard to graduate college or to plan your wedding, and then all of a sudden to have to think about it not happening. These are really, really hard times. It's completely and absolutely irrational to be worried. Now, during these times, it often makes us feel better to have someone to blame for why we're feeling bad. I mean, when you are feeling bad, when you are hurt, you want to know who is the source of that hurt and that suffering. That also makes a lot of sense. That's also very rational. Justice is cathartic. It doesn't make the pain go away, but it often soothes it. And there is something about seeing somebody who is responsible for hurting you being held accountable that in some way helps you to accept it, to move forward, and just to kind of cope. The problem here, as we sort of all live under the coronavirus condition, pandemic, etc., is that there's no readily available one person or entity to blame for this. That's just not how viruses work. That these things happen in ways that cannot be pinpointed to one person who wanted to inflict harm or wage biological war on others. Every report from the medical community has said this is a naturally occurring virus. It is not a matter of biological warfare. It is not a matter of something that was built in a lab to hurt other people. Okay, so we cannot pin this on one person or one group. I bring this up because, as you all know, I talked about this yesterday, that President Trump is saying that it's the China virus, and Senator Cornyn from Texas is saying China is to blame. The idea that we should blame a whole country or a whole group of people for what's happening is not accurate, and it's not responsible. And what we are learning and what we're seeing is that it's leading to widespread harassment and abuse of Asian people of all descent. And so we're seeing that the desire to blame someone for this is leading to actual hurt and pain for others. What I want to encourage you today, if you take nothing else from this video, is hopefully we can find ways to not let the suffering and pain that we are all going through as a result of the coronavirus translate into increasing suffering and hurt and abuse on people who have nothing to do with creating that situation. I think one of the worst things we can do when we're suffering is lash out in a way that creates suffering for others that is not due, is not right, and is not appropriate. So I think my hope is we can do that, okay? Now, I think what we can do is hold our leaders to account and do our best to help each other, right? I think, number one, we can all find ways to help each other through this pandemic. And there's so many different ways that we can be neighbors and family members, that we can reach out, that we can try to support financially or through time or just through offering to help those in need, okay? What I want to talk about today is how we can also make sure that our leaders are accountable, like that we can make sure that our leaders are honest and open about what's happening with this situation, okay? Well, let me give you an example from today that is egregious. I mean, that honestly, I was so angry yesterday. If you go back and watch the live stream, I was just furious about what John Cornyn said about blaming China. And I'm going to talk about that today. I'm going to give you a sort of handy explainer to anyone who parrots what he said about blaming China and harassing people of Asian descent. I'm gonna give you a handmade response to anyone who parrots that idea. But what we have today is something that is just as egregious or more, okay? So I want to go over that. Today, there's a report from NPR that Senator Burr, the senior senator from North Carolina, knew well ahead of time about the devastating consequences of the coronavirus. He knew what was going to take place in this country. It could get worse before it gets better. It could maybe go away. We'll see what happens. Now, that is not ever going to go into the archives under memorable leadership quotes or anything. And unfortunately, that's what we've come to expect from President Trump. The same day, here's what Senator Burr, North Carolina, said to a luncheon at a social club called the Capitol Hill Club. And I used to live in DC. DC has all these sort of clubs that you can pay to be a part of, and they kind of give you access to congressmen, congresspeople, senators, other political operatives. You kind of pay your way into these diner clubs and these dining establishments, and then you get to go to luncheons and hear someone like Senator Burr talk, right, if you have enough money. This is NPR. Burr has a unique perspective on the government's response to a pandemic, and not just because of his role as Intelligence Committee chairman. He helped to write the Pandemic All Hazards Preparedness Act, which forms the framework for the federal response. This is a man who is at the top of leadership in our federal government when it comes to responding to pandemics. Here's what NPR says, and I think this is the most damning part of this. But despite his longtime interest in biohazard threats, his expertise on the subject, and his role as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Burr did not warn the public of the government actions he thought might become necessary, as he did at the luncheon on February 27th. Folks, here's the essence of this. If you're an American with enough money and prestige to be at the Capitol Hill Social Club, then you get warned that the coronavirus might be as bad as the 1918 pandemic. You get warned that millions of people might die. You get told that we have the best tools in the world to respond to something like this, and so we'll be ready. Do you see the discrepancy there? Do you see the irresponsibility? Do you see what happened? There were weeks where he knew that this could be as bad as the 1918 pandemic. He didn't tell constituents. He didn't tell the American public. Now, you might be saying, well, maybe President Trump didn't want people saying this, and maybe there was a coordinated effort so that the information would be released at the same time, whatever. Okay, there's a world where Senator Burr says, you know what? I'm going to put my country and its safety over my party. This is from ProPublica, and it just came out today. Soon after, I'm quoting ProPublica, he, Senator Burr, offered public assurances that the government was ready to battle the coronavirus. The powerful chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Richard Burr, sold off a significant percentage of his stocks, unloading between $582,000 and $1.56 million of his holdings on February 13th in 29 separate transactions. February 7th is when he tells the Capitol Social Club. About a week later, he's selling off his stocks. He knows the stock market's in trouble. As the head of the Intelligence Committee, Burr, a North Carolina Republican, has access to the government's most highly classified information about threats to America's security. His committee was receiving daily coronavirus briefings around this time, according to a Reuters story. A week after Burr's sales, the stock market began a sharp decline and has lost about 30%. Folks, if you want to be angry, if you want to put blame somewhere, it should be at people like Richard Burr. It should be at the leaders who have done things like this. Weeks before we have an official sort of report from the government and an admission from Trump that this could be one of the worst pandemics we've ever seen, he tells a very limited social club that, yeah, this could be bad. Millions could die. What does he do a week later? Is he working with a group of Republicans and Democrats? Is he trying to warn the United States public about this? No. He's selling off his stocks because he knows what's going to come when news of this pandemic really spreads to the United States. That's sickening. Richard Burr should resign today. He should resign now because this is not leadership, and it's criminal and it's nefarious. And if you want to be angry, you want to be upset, don't blame China. Don't go out and say that it's your Asian neighbor's fault or the Asian American who's walking next to you or whatever. Okay. This kind of response to the pandemic, this makes me furious, and I think it should make you furious too. Here's what happened yesterday. What happened yesterday is John Cornyn, who's a senator from Texas, he said this, that we should blame China because that's the culture where people eat bats and snakes and dogs and things like that. I went over this in a live stream yesterday. You can check that out on this channel, okay? But I want to repeat something that I said yesterday, which is this. There's no evidence. There's no basis. There's no science. There's nothing. This is just a flippant comment that makes Asian and Asian American people a target. That's it. He has no evidence for this, but he's saying this and he's repeating racist stereotypes. Why? Because he wants someone to blame. Like I said at the beginning of this stream, he's looking for a way to assign guilt. And in this case, when it's our leaders, they want to assign guilt, not just to feel better, not for catharsis, like I said before. I totally understand wanting catharsis in a time like this. I get it. I get wanting to hold those who are responsible for pain to justice. I get that. But when it's leaders like this, who have the kind of information that these senators have, that when we see that Richard Burr had this kind of information, and surely John Cornyn did too, the reason he's saying we should blame China is not for catharsis. It's in order to get the heat off his own back, off of his back, off of Congress's back, and off President Trump, especially off of his back. That's what this is. It's a way to scapegoat and nothing else. I want to go over just real quickly some of the statements he made and just debunk them, and just so you have a handy explainer to anyone who approaches you with the idea that China is to blame, okay? So first of all, what is a coronavirus? The coronavirus is the one we're sort of enduring right now is new, but it's not unique. There are many coronaviruses of different strains. So this is from the World Health Organization. Coronaviruses make up a large family of viruses that can infect birds and mammals, including humans. These viruses have been responsible for several outbreaks around the world, including SARS, which happened in 2002, 2003, the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, which happened about a decade ago, and then most recently, COVID-19, or the coronavirus that we are enduring now, okay? All coronaviruses sport spiky projections on their outer surfaces that resemble the points of a crown. So corona means crown, and so these viruses are all in a family where when you look at them microscopically, their outer surfaces look like a crown. That's why it's called the coronavirus. Several coronaviruses utilize animals as their primary hosts and have evolved to infect humans too. So precursors to both SARS and MERS, both of which I'm going to talk about in a minute, did seem to appear in bats, okay? However, they went from bats to intermediary animals before infecting humans. The SARS virus jumped from bats to civets, which are small nocturnal mammals, on its way to people. MERS, or infected camels before spreading to humans. That we're living through did not go directly from bats to humans, okay? So there's no evidence that COVID-19 was passed directly from a bat to a person, none. There's no case, there's no story. We don't have reports. And even the reports that it went, that COVID-19, the coronavirus of today, went from snakes, has been questioned and significantly doubted and not proved. So when he says that China's to blame because that's a culture where people eat bats, we don't have any evidence that this virus or the other went directly from bats to humans, okay? Now let's take a look at recent outbreaks across the world that I've mentioned. So he says, John Cornyn yesterday says that MERS and SARS and H1N1 and other viruses like the one we're enduring now start in China, and that's why they're to blame. All right, so let's look at MERS. It was transmitted between animals and people, and it seems that it was inflicted through camels. So people came into contact with camels. If you've been to the Middle East, camels are part of the landscape there. My wife used to live in Egypt, and common occurrence to see camels. There are many camels in culture and the landscape, all that stuff. Well, contact with them, not eating them, but just contact with them is what led to the transmission of the virus. Okay, so we're definitely not in China, we're not in Asia, and we're not eating anything when it comes to the outbreak of MERS. Let's go to H1N1, or what some people call swine flu. 2009, the H1N1 influenza virus was first detected in people in the United States. This virus was originally referred to as swine flu because laboratory testing showed that its gene segments were similar to influenza viruses that were mostly recently identified in and known to circulate among pigs. Here's the short story with H1N1. It's a North American virus in terms of its origin, and its origin is pigs. So when John Cornyn is saying that China is this culture that should be condemned because it eats animals such as bats and snakes and whatever, he's basically trying to insinuate that they eat things that are weird and prohibited, and that's why we should condemn them, right? When it comes to H1N1, it is spread through North American pig herds. Those are animals that are commonly eaten all over North America, all over Europe. You'll find that in every store, every grocery store on this continent, right? Okay. So when it comes to H1N1, not originating in China, and certainly not originating in animals that people like Americans do not eat. It originates in North American pig herds. Let's go to SARS. SARS does originate in China, 2002, 2003. It's thought to be an animal virus from an as yet uncertain animal reservoir, perhaps bats, that spread to other animals and first infected humans in the Guangdong province of southern China. Okay, so it seems as if it was spread to other animals and then infected humans. Okay, this is the only one of the outbreaks in the last 2 decades that actually did come from China. And I want to just notice something. It's called SARS. It's not called the Chinese virus. It's not called the Guangdong virus. It's not called anything else but SARS because it's a virus. It's not an agent or an actor that is willfully inflicting pain. We can't lay blame on it like we would a person or like we would an army or something else. Let's just look at a few other outbreaks for historical context, and then we'll wrap this up. If we'd like to talk about North American outbreaks, we could talk about something called smallpox. Smallpox came to North America in the 1600s, and it came with Europeans who arrived at what they called the New World. Okay. Smallpox wiped out entire Native American tribes. Just say nobody calls smallpox the European virus, the American virus, the colonial virus, the imperialist virus, the Puritan virus, none of that. It's called smallpox. How about another? Typhoid fever broke out in this country around 1906 and 1907. Huge outbreak of typhoid fever, 1906, 1907. Okay. And you got a lot of folks who died. About 10 or 11,000 died each year for a couple of years there. Well, this outbreak of typhoid fever in New York was traced, at least in part, to someone named Mary, who was a cook. And Mary was cooking at a hospital unit in New York. And it seemed that she was really sort of the source of kind of spreading typhoid fever, not intentionally, but that happened. I've never called it the Mary fever. I've heard people talk about typhoid fever for a long, long time. No Mary fever, no white lady fever, none of that. No New York fever, typhoid fever. Here's what I hope you can take away from today. One, you have some handy facts at your disposal. Here's some things you can say to folks when they say, as somebody did to me on social media yesterday, well, China virus it came from China. That's all that President Trump's doing. It's not. Go read what John Cornyn said. He said China is to blame. He said they're at fault. Well, that is based on xenophobia. It's based on a long line of racism. If you want to go listen to Straight White American Jesus, the podcast, you will find on all the episodes this week me talking about it. You'll find me talking about it last week. It's all there. Okay. Here's what I hope you might respond when someone says, that China's to blame and we don't want Asian or Asian American people around us. When somebody makes a comment to an Asian or Asian American person in any space that you're in, when someone, one of your family members, makes some blasé comment at dinner or over the phone or whatever it is, here's what I hope you can say. I understand why you're afraid. I'm afraid too. This is a really unprecedented time. We are all anxious. This is touching every aspect of our lives. I hear you and I understand. I'm afraid too. We're in this together and this is really, really hard. But I'm sorry, there's no reason to blame Asian people as if there was like a willful, intentional result of actions that were out of the ordinary. Instead of translating our hurt and pain and anxiety into harassment and abuse of other people, let's work together. Let's work together to do our best to make it through this situation. And if we want to be angry and we want to direct that kind of energy somewhere, let's direct it to people like Richard Burr, who knew weeks ahead of time about the consequences that were coming for the United States as a result of this virus, who told his rich donors at the Capitol Hill Social Club, who sold off his stock, all while not doing anything. You can find this show at Straight White JC. We have a Straight White American Jesus Facebook page, and we have a Straight White American Jesus Patreon if you'd like to support us.